Helen, there we are, we're all back.
Hello, back again.
Okay, hello everybody. Right, fantastic. Lovely to see you all and welcome to our garden club meeting. If you can all hear me okay, can you wave your right hand? And if you can't hear me at all, wave your left hand. I'm joking, obviously. Okay, so happy New Year, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I think this is our fifth garden club Zoom meeting now. So my name is Indy. I'm chair of the Barmerston Village Garden Club. So we've got lots of guests on the Zoom meeting today. So if you want to just introduce yourselves on the chat box, just write hello and where you're from and your name or whatever, by all means do that there. Now, this is, I think, our fifth meeting. So we've got some new people here today for the first time. We had a Christmas quiz last week, which I think people really enjoyed. Now, if you haven't joined us before, the Barmerston Village Garden Club is pretty new. It only started in February last year, but we started to have our garden club meetings on Zoom since November. And I've kept in touch with lots of other garden clubs in the area. Some of the clubs were sort of struggling with the sort of technology. So I thought, well, why not have joint meetings with other garden clubs? Hence where the tender shoots. Sorry, can I just ask people to either stay muted, unless obviously you're going to say something that everybody wants to hear. So yeah, so if you're part of, say, something like the Hardy Plant Society or Plant Heritage or the Alpine Garden Society, they're all doing really well. They've obviously got big organizations behind them, so they're able to do Zoom meetings. But if you're a small independent garden club like ours, then it can be quite tricky. So I mean, I certainly wouldn't be able to justify spending garden club funds on meetings and speakers if only a handful of people are going to turn up to Zoom meetings. So by working together, it works out quite well. So this is what we're trying to do with the tender shoots.
Where Louis lives.
Sorry about that. Okay, so now if anybody wants to contribute at any point, by all means use the chat box. I mean, I know some people sometimes wave at the screen, but I can only see a limited number of people on the screen at once. I think I'm limited to about 25, and we've got, how many in the meeting today? We've got 52, so I may not be able to see you. So either try to write the message in the chat box. If I can see you waving, I will obviously try and respond. But alternatively, what you can do is there is a little function on Zoom which allows you to raise your hand. I'm going to try and do that now to see if it works, if you can all see it. Right, I'm raising my hand. Can people see that now? Just in the corner? No. You might be able to see it on the participants list. It's just another way of being able to catch the host's attention. So you use any of those methods, use the chat box, try and wave your hand or use the raise hand function, whichever you want to. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the agenda. There's a lot of items on there, but I'm not proposing to go through all of them. They're just optional items, and it looks a little bit structured at the moment, and that's not my intention at all. It's just that we're trying to come up with a few ideas of things we can go through. The agenda is actually down to you guys, whatever you guys want to talk about. These meetings are quite relaxed, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end, and then sometimes we'll have speakers for certain meetings. So although the agenda looks quite structured, that's not the intention, and I'm not proposing to go through all of them. I'm only going to be going through the ones that are in black text. Okie dokie. So in the last meeting, I presented people with plenty of options of things we could talk about, and then people voted for which they preferred. So those items there are the ones that people voted for, and it's in preference order as well. So the novice guides, I think people really liked the idea of that. So that was at the top. I'm also going to be, oh, sorry, I missed a point there actually. I'm also going to be following up from any questions from the previous meetings. So the last session we actually had was with the head gardener of Willerton Old Hall, Phil Smith. He gave us a talk on the 9th of December on fragrant plants. So I'm going to do a short follow-up from his talk before we go on to the optional items. I've got a little sort of topic to cover on tomatoes and tomato blight, so I'll be talking about that. And people really like the idea of tips. So if anyone's got tips to share, then by all means use this as an opportunity to do that. I have got a few to share with you today, just a few sort of tech tips. But in future meetings, these are there for anybody to contribute to. So the plan is hopefully in future, it's not me sitting here for half an hour just talking to you guys. Anybody in the group can actually contribute to any of these items. And if you've got any other suggestions of other topics you want to cover, by all means do that. So those are the sort of optional items. You know, if someone's been to see a particular garden, they want to share that with us, then that's great. Jobs to do, if there's any specific jobs to do that we want to talk about, you know, if there's any unusual jobs that you want to share with people, great. If there's a particular flower in your garden that's looking fantastic and you want to, you know, show it to us and tell us about it, brilliant. If there's anything that's been on TV that we want to talk about, or if there's anything in the news that's happened that we want to share with people. So for example, they're banning slug pellets, the blue slug pellets this year, I think it's April. So, you know, particular topics that might be useful to people. Then I thought in terms of trips for next year, I mean, obviously it's a tricky situation because we just don't know when we'll be allowed to have trips. But Road Hall open up for snowdrops in February, and they've confirmed that they will be allowed to open up. So I was wondering whether people might be interested in having a little trip. You'd have to make your own way there, so it wouldn't be a bus or anything like that. But we can talk about it at that point. And then the Q&A session. This isn't me answering the questions, by the way. We've got plenty of people in the room who, you know, hopefully should be able to answer the question. And we've always found that if anybody asks a question, usually there's somebody in the room who can actually answer the question, which is great. And that proved quite popular in the previous meetings. And in fact, we had to cut short the question answer session because we ran out of time. So yeah, so it was quite popular. We even had, I think, one question which was on roses, which lasted nearly 20 minutes. So that became quite popular. Now, I've already had a couple of questions from people, so hopefully if they're here today, they can ask those questions. But just get your thinking caps on. I've had one question asking for recommendations for wooden compost bins. So if anybody's got any suggestions for that, that'd be great. And then also Helen, I think she said she's got a water feature which is not working anymore. So there's a reservoir underneath which she's hoping to convert into a pond. So she's after a bit of planting advice for that area. So she has sent me some pictures, which I will send to you in the chat box. So if you're on a computer, you should be able to see those there. So yeah, so we'll cover that when we get to the Q&A session. I've also had an offer from somebody in the group who can answer questions on organic gardening, if anybody's got any questions on that, which would be great. Okay, so what else have we got? Oh yeah, so then at the end, I'll just tell you about the dates for the next meetings. And then also if anybody wants to jump into the breakout rooms at the end, by all means, you can do that if you want to. Okie dokie, so we shall crack on. Okay, so for those who attended Phil's talk on the 9th of December, his talk was based on fragrant plants in the garden and having scent in the garden for 12 months of the season, of the year for every season. And there was a few plants which he talked about, which I thought I would give you a few alternative suggestions for. So one of the plants that he talked about was a plant called Heptacodium mycinoides. Has anybody heard about one? If they have, just wave at the screen. Oh no. Okay. I've never heard about it before up until the beginning of this year. It seems quite a rare one, but apparently it's incredibly scented and really, really nice. Now, the one that Phil suggested, it is a very big plant. It grows to over 8 meters, that's about 20 or 30 foot. But I just thought it might be nice to mention there is a new one that has become available called Temple of Bloom. It's actually a dwarf version. It's still quite big, but it doesn't grow to 20 or 30 foot. It only grows to 8 foot, between sort of 6 and 10 foot, so on average about 8 foot. So if anybody wanted to consider that, it's still apparently got the same, scent and the same color change to those red flowers. That might be an option for you to consider. There's not loads of places that sell it. I have seen it on QVC and I've seen it on 1 or 2 websites in the UK, but you can get hold of it. So yeah, so that might be an option. It's a dwarfer version of the one that Phil mentioned. Okay, Phil also mentioned Philadelphus. Just wave at the screen if you know what Philadelphus is. Hopefully I should get a lot more for those. Yeah, oh, everybody. Fantastic. So hopefully you should probably know that it can be quite a big shrub or tree, whichever way you want to call it. And I think the one that Phil talked about was the lime-leaved one, or called not coronavirus. It's not called coronavirus. It's called Corona aureus, I think. Sounds like coronavirus. But there are a few dwarf versions which you can grow in a domestic garden. So I've listed 3 options there for you. One called Manto de Hermine, I can't say it, but it's a double flowered one, and there's a few photos of it there. It looks fantastic. And again, it's supposed to have the same level of scent as well. And that one only grows to about 80 centimeters. So that's a good option for you. There's another one called Snowbell, and then another one called Little White Love. So I mean, I know people who've got Philadelphus in the garden, and they are big, huge things, and need trimming quite regularly. So if you wanted a dwarf option, there's one for you. Now, I didn't want to tell you about this one because this is my favorite plant and I don't want anybody else really buying it. I just want to keep it to myself, but I thought, it's a bit unfair. So Phil, in his last talk, was talking about azaleas, which are scented. And at the time, I forgot to mention this one. So this is one I grow, and it is without doubt my #1 favorite plant in the garden. The scent on it is absolutely incredible. Now, this apparently is the very first rhododendron that is dwarf, that is hardy in the UK, and that is scented. There are some fantastic rhododendrons that are scented, but they're absolutely huge or they're not hardy. So this is the first one that we can grow in a domestic garden that is robust. It will survive our winters, and the scent on it, I have to tell you, it is absolutely insatiable. It is incredible. So look out for that. Again, it's not very common. I have seen it once at Trentham Gardens, and I've seen it online at quite a few places. So just make a note of that one if you're interested. Now, Phil also mentioned honeysuckles, scented honeysuckles, but the ones he was talking about were the big straggly ones that we all have probably seen in our gardens. And I did briefly mention this in the last meeting, but I thought I'd just show a few photographs. These 2 are actually dwarf ones that you can grow in a pot. And I've got both of these, and they are brilliant, absolutely fantastic. Excuse me. And when we had our open garden events here in 2019, this was one of the most popular plants that people kept asking me about in my garden, asking me how I'd managed to keep a honeysuckle so small and where they could get it from, and obviously the varieties. So those are 2. The first one's called Chic Shock, and the other one's called Strawberries and Cream. Chic Shock grows to about 1 foot. So it is very, very small, and that's the picture there on the right hand side. It is every year it's covered in flowers unless it struggles with green fly, so just watch out for that. So if you get those in early in the season, it will just devastate your flowers, so just make sure you're on top of that one. But Chic Shock has got a very lax habit. It's almost like a ground cover. It is quite flat. It only grows to about 1 foot tall, which for a honeysuckle is just incredible. But I keep that by the door so I can get the scent when the flowers are out. Strawberries and Cream, on the other hand, it's about 3 foot tall. It's got a lovely structure to it, very upright, lovely shape, and again, the flowers on it are brilliant. So yes, I'd definitely recommend those 2 if you wanted a honeysuckle but didn't want the big rambly ones. Phil also mentioned clematis in the last talk, and I thought I'd mention this one. This is one that I've got in my garden, and this has again been very popular at the open garden events. It's a bit of a mouthful, the name, Clematis extritonata Ganata. But again, it's a plant that everyone asks me about when I have the open garden event. Very scented, and the scent that you get from it is like apple blossom. So it is really, really, really nice. And I remember one of our garden club members, Kate, when she saw it, she said, "Oh, I want to go and buy it." And I said, "Well, if you wait to sort of shop around, you should be able to buy it for about £3." She said, "No, I'm not waiting." It was so nice, and went out and spent 15 quid on a big plant. So yeah, so this one is quite popular. So yeah, so look out for it. Again, it's not very common, but I've picked it up previously at one of the shows. I think it was the Birmingham BBC flower show. So if you do go to anything like Tatton or anything like that, you should be able to see it, and you will be able to pick it up for less than £3. And just briefly, I thought I'd better mention this garden. This was the one that Phil talked about in his last talk. He said it was a wonderful garden, definitely worth visiting, but it's just not very well known about at all, and I'd never heard about it either. Even the RHS there, it says, the RHS have commented on it, apparently it's one of the most important and enchanting gardens of modern gardens, and it's thoroughly recommended to go and visit it. And just a bit of a secret tip, one of our garden club members is Jane here today. Apparently it's owned by Jane's cousins, I think, if I remember correctly. Maybe she can comment in the box and let us know. We did ask her if she might be able to get us a group discount, a family discount or friends discount, but I think she said at best she might be able to get one slice of cake, which I don't think will go very far between all of us. But yeah, so maybe in the future when we're allowed to visit a garden again, perhaps this might be something we could go and see. But yeah, make a note of that one. Okay, so on to the guides. So if anybody has grown tomatoes and has had blight, just wave at the screen. Oh, okay, brilliant. Has anybody grown tomatoes and never had blight? Wave at the screen. Okay, well, one person. Okay, so in the chat box then, can anybody recommend any solutions for preventing or dealing with blight? So just click on the chat box and tell us your recommendations. If you want to, I mean, I'm going to give you the option to unmute yourselves if you want to speak. If anybody wants to tell us.
Well, I've not had blight for many years now. The same way I've not had whitefly either. There were sort of period, you know, as I've been here about 40, 50 years now, you know, we've gone through all of these various things. Unfortunately, I certainly not had blight in recent years, and the whitefly disappeared. And at one point, whitefly was so bad that people gave up growing tomatoes altogether. So for blight, certainly it's a matter of ventilation, trying to make sure that you keep the air inside, you know, as suitable as possible for tomatoes.
Does anybody else got any recommendations?
Tomato blight is the same disease as potato blight, so it affects tomatoes because they're in the same family, and so it's the conditions, it's the damp and high humidity. So yeah, good aeration, growing them under cover definitely helps. So indoor tomatoes definitely better than outdoor, and you can get resistant varieties.
Brilliant. Has anybody else got any suggestions?
I was going to say I've grown tomatoes, but not for long. But I grow mine in the greenhouse, but the greenhouse is ventilated. And I've just took it that I've been lucky. So whether it's luck or the fact that it's well ventilated, I don't know.
I've grown, hello?
Sorry, go on.
I've grown tumbling toms in baskets and they've been wonderful, absolutely wonderful. I don't know what I've done, but they've been absolutely wonderful.
Usually the cherry tomatoes and the smaller ones are less susceptible because they ripen earlier. So if you're trying to grow the bigger ones that take longer to ripen, usually the blight comes more at the end of the season. So the quicker you can get them growing and picking them, the better.
Well, I would always recommend anybody to grow sun gold as a variety. It is extremely sort of good temperament plant and survives all sorts of conditions. And, you know, as I say, I've not had blight, I don't think, until perhaps the very, very end of the season. But then on the other hand, I don't normally try growing potatoes either in the garden, but I have this year, but I still didn't get it this year. I think one of the things is, of course, the climate's changing. You know, we are getting really much hotter and drier summers. So, you know, when the days when we used to have sort of really dull, dreary, sort of British English summers tend to have gone.
Yeah, so there is, Sue's mentioned it in the chat, there is actually a forecast that you can get, and I think, I forget the name for it now, but I think they call it the Hutton Period. So there's a certain set of conditions that once it's achieved, that's when blight suddenly starts to rear its head. So I think it's down to 2 consecutive days of humidity at a certain period and temperature. I mean, I don't know because I'm not experiencing that, but there is a forecast that you can get, and then that at least gives you a warning as to when to expect blight in the garden, whether it's on your tomatoes or it's on your potatoes. Okay, so it might be a bit early in terms of talking about tomatoes, but there is a reason why I've put it in the topic for today, because a lot of us will now start to think about buying the seeds. So I think one of the first things you can look to do to prevent it is to actually buy a resistant variety. So I've listed 4 particular varieties that are available. The first one, Crimson Crush, is apparently really good, and there's a report there on the right hand side that you can see from Graham Rice at the RHS, which suggests that Crimson Crush is 100% blight resistant, which I'm quite surprised by, but it's the RHS saying it, I'm not going to argue with them. But there's a few other varieties. Oh Happy Day, there's one called Mountain Magic and one called Furline. So if you're looking through your catalogues, then pick one of those. For those members of Barlaston, we have got our Sutton's discount code, which gives you 50% off all the seeds. So if you want to go for the Crimson Crush, you can get it for half price, which is pretty handy. And I think actually there was only one Crimson Crush originally, but now I think there's like a whole range of Crimson Crush, and they were apparently designed for flavour, because what tends to happen is you might go for one particular type of thing, blight resistance, but then it lacks flavour. The ones that have got great flavour maybe get blight, but actually Crimson Crush apparently it's one of those where you get both, the benefit of both blight resistance as well as good flavour. So yeah, so when you're looking through your seed pack catalogues, look for one of those. And then the other thing I thought it might be worth mentioning is, have you ever seen in garden centres grafted tomatoes? Just wave at the screen if you have seen them before. Yeah. And if you have seen them, you probably know that they can be quite expensive. I mean, with the standard tomatoes, you can get them for, basically a pound a plant or even less, maybe 5 for £5 or something. The grafted ones, they can be £5 for one, or even more in some occasions. So I thought, why wouldn't it might be nice for us to try and graft our own tomatoes this year, if anybody's up for that. So what I've done is I've managed to find 2 rootstocks that are available that you can buy in the UK. So the one on the left is called Submarine, and the one on the right is called Estamino. I mean, the seeds are expensive. You don't get many for what you pay, but it's still certainly cheaper than buying a ready-made grafted plant. And obviously the other satisfaction is that you've done it yourself. So, for example, that King's Seeds one there, Estamino, you get 12 seeds for £4.55. But if there's a group of you who want to get together, you can actually buy them wholesale, and anybody can buy them. So I think there's a company called Mole Seeds where you can get like 100 seeds for maybe 10 or 12 or 15 pounds. So you could divide that between you. So that might be something nice to try. And I don't know how to do it myself, but I'm going to try and find out. But it'd be an interesting thing for us to have a go at this year if anybody's up for it. And then it'd be nice to compare at the end of the season to see how we did. In terms of blight later on in the season, and we'll talk about it again later on. But in terms of an organic treatment, apparently aspirin, soluble aspirin tablets work really well. There is reports. This isn't a old wives' tale. There is actually reports that prove that it does actually work. And what they've said is if you follow the correct regime of using it, then it actually reduces the chances of catching blight by about 50%. And the other unique benefit is apparently it makes your tomatoes sweeter. So it doubles the sweetness. And I think it's something to do with the salicylic acid that's inside. It tricks the plant to think that it's under attack. So it tries to make the fruits taste sweeter so that it gets pollinated and reproduces quicker. So that might be something for you to think about later on in the season. Okay, so I thought I'd just go through a couple of tech tips. Now, last month, we went through how to use your phone to identify plants. I mean, there's lots of apps out there that you can use. Quite a lot of them you have to pay for. And the one that I showed you was Google Lens, which was free. So that's what I use in the garden when I'm trying to identify a plant. But I thought I'd just go through a couple of slightly different tips today. Quite often when we're on a Zoom meeting, I'll see people with their phone and they'll be pointing it at the screen, trying to take a picture of what's on display. So if somebody's talking about a particular plant, they're trying to capture the name for it. So I thought I'd just show you a couple of tips that you can use to be able to take down the details that are on a presentation. And this will become useful when we have a few talks from experts, because some are happy for us to record the meetings, which is great, which means that you can go online afterwards and see the meeting again if you've missed it. But some speakers have asked for their meetings to not be recorded. So if you want to make a note of any plant they're talking about, then this allows you to do it. So if you're on a computer, there's a little button on your computer keyboard which says print screen. What that does is it takes a picture of your entire desktop and then saves it down into your pictures folder. So that can be quite useful if you want to take a snapshot of something that's on screen. If you're on a mobile device, like a mobile phone or an iPad or something like that, then usually there's two ways of doing it. You can swipe down from the top and there might be a little icon that you can click on. So you'll find several icons on there. One might say Wi-Fi, one might say Bluetooth, one might say, volume, turning it up and down. There should be another one which says screenshot, and that takes a screenshot of the phone. If you can't do that, or if you can't find it, the other option is to press the buttons on the side. So on my particular phone, if I hold down the volume button and the power button together, it takes a screenshot of the screen. So that might be useful if you've seen a presentation or something and you want to write down the plant name, but you're not quick enough to write it down. Also, if people are making suggestions in the chat box, you can actually save the chat to your own computer. So if people are making suggestions and you want to refer back to it later, you can click on. By the way, you can't do this on a device, as far as I know. It's just on a computer. If you click on the settings on the right-hand side, it gives you an option to save chat. So again, it saves it down to your computer. You'll see three little dots in the chat box on the right-hand side. And just one other little tip. If people know how to use YouTube, just wave at the screen. If you've used it, hopefully that should be a lot of people. Okay. So what I will do is I'll usually, after the meeting, upload our meetings to YouTube, so people who've missed it can go back and see it, or if you've already seen it, you can go back and refer to it again. But you might not want to sit there for an hour and go through the whole thing. Now, there's a little function on YouTube which allows you to play it back in a faster speed. If you want to press on your keyboard Shift and the arrow button, it's not actually arrow, but it's the bracket, then that speeds it up. So it goes from 1.25, 1.5 all the way up to double speed. Or you can click, there's a little picture there I put on the screen. You can click on that little cog and then it allows you to change the playback speed so you can watch it even faster. So hopefully that might be useful to one or two of you. Okay, in terms of trips out this year, Road Hall have got their Snowdrop event open, and they've had it confirmed that they are able to run it, and that's not too far from where we are. So I thought it might be nice for us to have a trip out there. We'd have to go in our own cars and make our own way there, and they won't allow me to make any group bookings either, so I can't get any group discounts. So I was just wondering if people might be interested in that. just if you would be interested, just say yes in the chat box. And if you are interested, we can try and arrange a day which we could all go. Obviously, we'd have to maintain social distancing. And I'm going to ask you to vote. So something should pop up on your screen. Now, it's only available on Thursday, Friday, Saturday or Sunday. So of those days, which days would people prefer to go? And it's a multiple choice, so you can vote for as many days as you want to. And also, just a bit of advice from people in the room. It's open for a month. So which week would be best to go and see it? Do you think it'd be the first week, second week, third week or fourth week? And then once people have agreed on a date, then hopefully we can all arrange to go at the same time. So I'll just give you a moment to vote on that. So hopefully something should be popping up on your screen where you can vote on it. Okay, I'll just give you another 5 seconds. Okie dokie. All right. Thank you for that. I'm going to end that. And I'm going to share the results with you. So Friday looks like the most popular day. And people suggested the third week. Okay. Yeah. Third week of the month. Okay, good. So if we suggested that it would be the Friday in the third week, then everyone can book their own tickets and then we can go and see the snowdrops. Brilliant. Thank you for that. Okie dokie. I think this is the last thing I was going to talk about. Now, if anybody watches Gardener's World, obviously the normal program doesn't resume again till March, but there's a winter special coming on Friday on BBC Two at 8 p.m. So if anybody's interested in that, set your program guide to record that. Something that's happened in the news recently, there's a big shift to try and move away from peat-based products. And a lot of the Irish peat bogs have been closed down on the 30th of December. So there was a legislation that was passed to close down and move away from peat extraction. So you will start to see over the next few months or next year or so changes in the recipes of some of the mixes that you would buy. So just keep a watch out for that, because obviously we want to try and move away from using peat. We've got some membership cards now. Thank you to Liz. I'm not sure if she's here today, but she's designed the membership card for us, and that's it on the right-hand side. So we'll be getting those printed in the next month or two. So people can use those when they're going into the garden centres to get their discounts on plants. Also, anybody who has joined up in 2010, we're going to be rolling forward the membership fees for 2021. Because obviously we haven't had many meetings in 2020. And also for those who are members of Barlaston, we were going to be ordering the potatoes, the purple potatoes, for everybody to grow. Now, my only problem is, because of the current restrictions, once they're delivered, I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to distribute them to people because of the lockdown situation. So if anybody's got any ideas of being able to get the potatoes out to people, I'd be willing to hear them. The only potential option is once the restrictions are lifted at the end of February, then we can perhaps, hopefully, get them out to people. But if anyone's got any other options, we can try and dish out the membership cards and the potatoes at the same time. Okie dokie. So that's it for my bit. Now we're going to move on to the Q&A session. So hopefully people have got questions. I don't want to sit here looking like a wally if nobody's got any questions. So just make one up if you haven't got one. So I'm going to ask you to unmute yourselves so you can either speak, but we might just need to find a way of making sure people take it in turns. You can either use the chat box to ask a question or just wave your hand or use the raise your hand button. So let's kick off then. So has anybody got any questions they want to ask? In fact, actually, should we go to Helen first? Is Helen there? We may as well do Helen's question first, seeing as though she sent it to me in advance. Hey there, Helen. You're on mute at the moment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, right.
Right, so I've just sent a picture to everybody who's on a computer of Helen's little area, and I'm also going to send you the plants that she's considering. So while I'm doing that, Helen, do you want to just ask you a question?
Yes. 17 years ago, we had a water feature, which was very nice, but it was fitted professionally, but it never really worked. And since then, we've had numerous people come in to try and get it to work. And then somebody was very technical, but basically told us it would never work. So what we decided to do was dig out the reservoir, have a small pond in the middle, and then planting all the way round. First of all, I thought of having ferns and companion plants to those. And then I thought, no, I'd like some colour, and looked at a plant list. So I'd just like people's advice on what they think. We're digging all the gravel out, digging the pond out, and going to have some pond plants in it. And as Indy says, I did send some photos.
Yep, so I've just sent the photos to everybody in the chat. So if you're on a computer, you'll be able to see it. If you're on a device, you may not be able to. And I think there was quite a few plants on that list, wasn't there, Helen, that you were considering?
Yes, I tried to get all year round interest.
And is it where the plants are going to go? Is it going to be a boggy area?
No.
It's not.
No.
So basically, you're asking people for some ideas for plants that would be
Yes,
okay around the
what do
pond.
people think? Should I put ferns and, as I say, companion planting, or go for colour?
Irene, you're on mute at the moment. I can't hear you.
Hello, Helen.
Hello.
Hello. Well, I've just got a small pond, but I've tried various things, but irises were the thing that made it all look spectacular.
Yes.
And you can get smaller ones and bigger ones. So I've got cream with yellow in and blue. I don't know the names of all of them, I'm afraid.
Right.
It looks grand for very little. And then Indy's give me, what was the twisted one that you had, Indy, for growing in water? Twisted plant.
Oh, it'll come to me. It'll come to you in a second. Don't worry.
But it looks like a reed, but it's twisted.
Right.
And, you know, that gives a bit of structure as well. So you could have your ferns lower, smaller ferns, and have the irises above.
Oh, right. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Irene.
All right.
Has anybody else got any suggestions?
No. Folius are nice.
What was that? Sorry.
Folius.
Folius.
Yeah. Folius, yeah.
Yeah. Alan, is that Alan waving his hand? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean this is for the actual pond rather than surround, but we got water hawthorn this year, and I don't know if that's a well-known plant or not, but it's been really good.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And there's hostas.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rivali.
Yeah.
Marsh
very nice.
marigolds.
Oh, yes. Yes.
That's quite nice. And some small water lilies.
Yeah.
Oh yes, actually, yeah. So water lilies. Apparently, there's a dwarf one.
Yes, just
I don't know why I have an affinity for dwarf things, but I think it's called Helvola, and it's the world's smallest water lily, and you can grow it in apparently I think you can grow it indoors as well. It's that small, so you might want to look out for that one.
Right, thank you.
So if anybody's got any more suggestions, just keep them coming. You can put it in the chat box or elsewhere. Claire, is that your hand up?
I mean, it was doing. I had enough
Wasn't.
before, didn't I?
No, you got your hand up. I thought you were going to ask a question.
No, I might ask me compost bin one.
Oh yes, okay. No, go for it then. Go for it.
I'm wanting to get a couple of compost bins or make a couple of compost bins, wooden ones. And I've seen them in the Sutton's catalogue, but they're not cheap. And I've also, when I've had a little mooch about, seen people making them out of pallets and stuff like that online. And the chap at Beech Grove did that. What has anybody else got in the way of non-plastic compost bins?
Put my hand up. We've got pallets, lots of them, compost bins. I can send my husband to tell you all about that. We've also got some wire mesh that we've made them from.
Yeah, can I just say that I think that compost bins are better made of mesh because the air can get in and they rot much quicker. And I don't think it's worth having a solid edge to a compost.
Well, if you've got, if you've got your wooden pallet, you've got the slats. You make it so that the air gets in. And as long as you turn it pretty regularly.
Do you put a bit of carpet on the top or
yes, carpet goes on the top. Well, if we've got leaves, we collect the 2 big beech trees and all the leaves go in one and the carpet goes on the top, but they need to be turned regularly.
Yeah. And do you have to moisten them as well?
Can do. I won't tell you what you could moisten them with, but I'm sure Andy can use his imagination.
It depends where it is. Sometimes the rain is enough.
I've not long moved and I've inherited a plastic one, which is just full of wood lice and dry gubbins, nothing of any use whatsoever. So that's going to be.
But the green plastic ones, the sort of domey ones, we use that for our food waste. You know what we chop off inside, but it makes a very good wormery as well. That does.
It does.
Yeah. So it's always full of little worms.
Yeah, little red ones.
Yeah. So that's just for the food, but not. And you've got to make sure with that it sits on a slab so that you don't get any vermin coming in. Because when we lived in Cornwall, we had something that was nesting in it quite happily. So it needs to be on a solid bottom anyway.
And do you get compost out the bottom like you would do normally?
Well, ours is ready. I've been told that ours is ready to be done. So what I think we will do, we'll turn it on the side, put a big sheet down and take the bottom part out and bag it into something. And then the bit that hasn't decomposed, we'll put that back in.
Yeah, that's what we do.
Yeah.
And also we have one compost that's ongoing during the year and the other one is resting and developing.
Well, we've got.
And so we move from one to the other.
Yes, we've got about 4 compost bins plus this food one at the moment, so they keep having to be turned.
I've not done it before. I'm going to give it a go.
Good. You can get some good stuff though.
So
lovely stuff. Absolutely.
And if you've got a surplus of leaves, just put them in a black bin bag, puncture them with holes and then stick them in a corner for a year and just leave them. And then make lovely compost.
Oh, lovely.
So Jill, if you're offering to send your husband round to other people's houses, does that offer apply to everybody?
I would offer them to come and have a look at what he's made, because he's made several. I think we've still got pallets sitting outside. You know, he has this. Yes, he likes collecting pallets. He's just made some bird boxes from some as well.
Brilliant. So we've got a few more suggestions for Helen's area. So we've got pond marginals. We've got Geum rivali. That's quite a short one with a sort of nodding head, I think. Primulas, hostas, astilbe. Astilbes, they like quite a, I think, a damp.
Yeah, they like water.
And filipendula. So we've got those suggestions.
Thank you.
So has anybody else got any other questions?
Yeah, you talked last time about purple potatoes. I have been growing sweet potatoes, but not doing very well because it's not warm enough here. So I was thinking of giving your purple potatoes a go. I found somewhere to order them from, but what I wanted to know is how many, if you put one sweet potato in, how many do you get back? Potatoes, like.
Yeah.
Don't need a promise on that.
So for those who are new today, I'm quite passionate about growing healthy, nutritious vegetables, and I'm quite keen on purple potatoes. There was a study done in Japan. There's a particular island on Okinawa where they almost have 0 levels of Alzheimer's and dementia. And the reason for that is because they eat purple potatoes all the time. And it's to do with the antioxidants, polyphenols, all those kinds of things in them. So I've been growing them for a number of years. So to answer your question, the purple potatoes have not been bred for big crops. So the ones we get these days, they've obviously been bred for years and years and years because most people grow white potatoes and they want big crops. So with the purple ones, you'll never get quite as big a crop. But also it depends on the size of the spud that you get as well. So for example, Purple Majesty, which is a variety I've been growing for several years, that one you will get big potatoes. They are big, but you don't get a huge amount. So I probably for every one.
That's the one I'd seen that on the catalogue.
Yeah, so that particular one I've grown for years. For every one potato, I might get somewhere between 6 and 10 back.
Oh, wow.
But some of them will be a decent size. But the one I grew this year that I trialed was one called Azaleas, and that is the one I would definitely recommend going forward. For one spud, I must have got probably 15 or 20. It was, but they're all small, very small, much smaller, but they're a vigorous crop and you get lots of potatoes from them. And I got almost 0 blight on that potato. It's a really good blight resistant one. So that's called Azaleas. That is widely available. If you want to buy it online, if you're struggling, I would recommend a nursery called Dundry Nurseries. That's Dundry. So they're a big supplier down south, and you can buy them in individual potatoes or in 3 kilo bags, I think. So that's pretty good. So Azaleas. If you want to try the red one as well, because red ones are quite healthy for you as well. Its sister potato is called Heidi Red. So that's the other one I would recommend.
Okay, thank you very much.
No problem. John, have you got your hand up? Are you wanting to ask a question?
Me?
Yeah, you've got your hand up.
I was just wondering whether you switched off the raise hand option.
No.
I did it and I saw my hand come up on my screen, but it won't work anymore. And I just wonder whether you got some magic trick on that.
No, your hand is up.
Oh, you can see it, can you?
Yeah.
And it was on my screen as well. Oh, right. Okay.
So
what I was quite interested in, you several times in these talks, you made some statements about the quality of our water supply, and the dangerous things in it, and I just wonder where you get that from. I was so interested. I looked up on the Severn Trent website, put in my postcode. And it was a glowing report about the quality of water in Barlaston. We're very fortunate.
No, I think, John, we might need to have a separate session on this one because we spent 15 minutes talking about it last time.
Don't want to know what you got against our water.
We don't want to have the debate multiple times. But no, it wasn't a statement about the quality of the water. So what we were talking about was nematodes. So do people know what nematodes are? If you do, wave at the screen. Yeah. So they're microscopic creatures. And they're very popular, and it's a good organic way of dealing with pests that we've got at the moment. But the advice was to use, rather than tap water, use rainwater because of the chemicals that are in tap water. So this isn't about it being dangerous to us as humans. We're big creatures, but a microscopic insect that doesn't normally travel through tap water. It can be quite harmful to it. And the other tip about nematodes was to water either at dusk or dawn, not during the day, because a lot of people water nematodes on during the day. And don't forget, these are microscopic insects that actually live underground, so they never see daylight. So if you put it on in the middle of the day in the baking sunshine, you're just killing them off, as well as the chlorine that's in the water as well. So that's where the tip came from. So I wasn't suggesting there was anything wrong with our water, John.
Well, yeah, fair enough. But obviously there is, and Monty Don has mentioned that at various times, hasn't he? And there will be chlorine in the water that comes out of your cold tap. But if you sort of use the internal tap, the water that comes down through, you know, from the tank up above, that's had long enough to get rid of the chlorine. The water that's up in your top tank, if you really want some without any chlorine in, just use water from there.
Brilliant. So there's a couple,
worry about that.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions in the chat box. Do the purple potatoes taste the same as white ones? Yes, they do. It's exactly the same thing. They've not been genetically modified or anything. They are completely natural. They come from Peru, and you can get different flavored ones. If you want to grow one particularly just for flavor, I mean, I can't personally tell the difference. The potato tastes like a potato, but there's one called Vitalotti, which is a little fingerling, and apparently it's one of the best tasting ones, but you don't get a big crop. They are very small, which is why they're quite expensive. So that's Vitalotti. Oh, and someone's saying yes, they do taste the same. You can't order them through us. We are ordering some potatoes, but it's for the Barlaston Club members who have paid up. So each year we give out potatoes so people can grow them at home. But you can buy them from most potato shows, and there's a few places which sell them online as well. Has anybody else got any gardening questions?
Yes, I have.
Is that Shirley?
I have.
Yeah, go ahead.
Indeed.
Oh,
no, it's Bev.
Bev. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Can I go ahead? Yeah. Okay. These are 3 questions I've got from friends. Someone's asked, what causes brown rot on his apples? Is cooking apples and eating apples? Any ideas?
Does anybody know?
Anybody know?
They always got it on them.
Well, exactly. I mean, if you get if an apple gets any sort of cut on it or bruise, it will get brown rot on it. And I think unless you're incredibly careful, you just have to put up with it.
I looked at my apples
okay,
tonight.
I'll pass that on.
I looked at my stored apples, remarkably well at the moment, just stored in polystyrene boxes, the ones we picked up off the ground.
Oh, very good.
They've rotted, but the majority are perfectly okay.
Yeah. Right. Another question. It's about, can you see this plant? Apparently it's called a Clivia.
Oh, it's begonia. Oh, it's not.
It looks like a begonia, but apparently it's called a Clivia, and it will have a red flower on it. And I've been given it. I didn't know it would flower, but the friend who gave it to me said he wants to know when to feed it best for it to flower. Any ideas with that? When's the best time to feed it?
So did you say
somebody
it was
said
Clivia?
Look like a Clivia. I don't know.
It looks much more like a begonia to me.
Yeah. Our Clivia doesn't look like that.
I thought it was.
It's definitely a begonia.
Friend said it's a Clivia.
No, Clivia has strap.
Right, okay, right. Well, we'll forget that one. So, do you know about anything about a Clivia then? Anybody know about feeding a Clivia? No.
They need to be kept cool in the winter.
Right. Okay.
Want me to have a Clivia?
I mean, in terms of feeding Clivias, I mean, you wouldn't want to do it at this time of the year because they'll be going dormant. So I think it'd probably be when it's coming back into growth, either in spring or in summer.
Okay.
But yeah,
I'll pass that one on.
if I remember correctly,
the other question.
Yep.
I've got another question as well. Overwintering of cyclamens, outdoor cyclamens. What do people do about overwintering them? And this is from another friend. It's not my question. I haven't got any in my garden, but
well, they should overwinter naturally, but if you want to protect them a bit, put a few leaves over them just to keep them covered.
right. Okay. Yeah. Because if the frost does get to them and the wet, they just go very well. They just rot away, don't they?
Are you talking about
especially if they're
outdoor?
in the container? They do.
Are you talking about outdoor?
Yeah, outdoor cyclamens.
Because the ones that are outdoors,
Yes,
if it's a cyclamen coum or a cyclamen hedropholium, they're incredibly robust. They're very, very hard.
Right,
very hardy.
okay.
So they shouldn't, as far as I know, they don't require any kind of protection at all. But yeah, I mean, like Alan says, if you want to cover it with a few leaves or something, you could do, but you shouldn't need to. I guess the only proviso would be is if they're in a very damp area. So over winter, if they're gonna get
perhaps
really
that's
damp.
what he's got. It was someone who asked me to ask the question, and so yeah, perhaps they are in a damp area.
It could well be.
Thank you for that.
No,
thank you.
They could be confused with the cyclamens though, so they could well have bought the indoor one and planted it outdoors.
Christmas rose.
Right, yeah, perhaps.
Because I've only been into gardening for a couple of years. I remember when I walked into a garden centre and saw them, I thought brilliant, and they're outdoors. I know they're under shelter, but I wouldn't have thought that they weren't hardy. So I could have quite easily planted them outdoors, thinking they'll be absolutely fine. And they do look like the traditional ones, the traditional cyclamens. So you might get confused. So it could well be that it's the indoor one that he's planted outside.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
4 hours later, against the odds, and the others.
Just turn it down.
You can
Oh
make
yeah. Does anyone know of anyone who's got any well rotted manure? Any farms or anything in the village that have well rotted manure?
I think the problem is that well-rotted manure from the farmers is now far too valuable to them to just sell to you. They use that to fertilize their fields, and it's not like in the old days when you could just throw fertilizers at it. So on the whole, they will be distributing that across their fields. And
I've usually had it off of before I lived around here, off of livery yards, horses and livery yards.
Yeah, they're your best bet.
Yeah.
If you've got any in the area, I'd go for a livery yard.
Yeah.
Or a private yard where they don't, where there's no fertilizer on the grass. But
yeah,
I'm not from Barlaston, sorry, so I don't know where.
Hi Irene, you want to ask something? Do you want to unmute yourself?
Claire, there is the Middleton livery that's on Old Road as you go towards Trentham by the barns. You could ask there.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
I've had a message, Sue, you sent it to me directly rather than to everybody else. Apparently Shropshire Organic Gardeners are going to sell the potatoes soon. I think it was it the end of the month? So she suggested you look them up online. I think I do remember seeing on the list of their potatoes that Blight Annalise was on there, as well as Heidi Red. So if you want to go for those, you can find them there. And I'm guessing, Sue, are they going to be organic potatoes? She's probably on mute somewhere. Well, I hope so. If it's Shropshire Organic, I'm hoping they are organic.
I didn't think it was a clip. Well, I didn't know what it was.
Right. Has anybody else got any other questions then?
Only about, you said last week about producing, I don't know, a spreadsheet or something of speakers.
Yep.
Yeah, is that something you're doing, or do you need any help with it? Or I mean, I've got a list and how I find speakers.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is all brand new, what we're doing here with the sort of the network of clubs working together. So I'm still finding my feet. I'm still a bit wet around the ears. And these meetings are just relaxed meetings. And then obviously occasionally we'll have speakers as well. So we've had a couple of question and answer sessions which have worked really well. And it was just throwing some other ideas out there that people might be interested by. So in terms of the speakers, that's one question I get asked quite a lot. So as it stands at the moment, this is just me doing all this. I will be after some advice from people as to what to sort of do next and how we sort of move things forward. And if that is one of the suggestions that people are interested by, then yeah, we can do it. But I will probably need people's help to be able to do it, because it can't just be me doing all the work.
Okay, well, I'm happy to help you. I know I'm not from Barlaston, but you know,
yeah,
we're all got to help each other, haven't we? So
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, fantastic. And it's the same with these sort of meetings. I mean, they're still fresh. I mean, this is only our sort of third open meeting. We've had a couple of speakers. We had the quiz and the speaker, and we're still finding our feet with it, you know, trying to get other clubs involved, because it can be difficult if you're a small club with the sort of technical skills as well as the costs of speakers and things. But if there's any other things that we can do through this network that can help each other, then that's got to be great, hasn't it?
Well, so far, I think you're doing really well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Agree.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Indy.
Yes, agree.
Thank you.
Hi, Indy.
Hi there, Helen.
Are you going to tell them about what you and I have joined together and done?
Woo!
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I thought that was just between you and me, Helen.
With regards to speakers and speakers only.
Yeah. Well, it's to save me doing all the talking, why don't you tell them? You can do that if you want.
Okay. Fine. I know that I haven't got very good view at the moment. But Stone Chrysanthemum Daily Society had a very full 12 months of speakers booked for this next year. Some of them we've sadly had to cancel, but others have agreed to share with all of you through Indy. Indy's the whiz on the computer. I'm not, but I've got the contacts for speakers, some really good ones. So we've got some super speakers coming up in the next few weeks. Indy's got the list.
Good.
Sounds good.
Very good.
And you're all welcome, as far as Stone is concerned, to use our speaker list and join us free of charge. No problem.
That's very kind.
Lovely.
Thank
you, Margaret.
Thank you.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. I mean, I've spoken to lots of other garden clubs over the last, several weeks, and it is difficult if you're a small club if you haven't got the technical skills. And I certainly wouldn't be able to justify spending £100 on a speaker if only 10 of my members are going to join the Zoom meeting. So it just makes sense for me to open it up to other clubs and for us all to work together. And certainly the feedback I've had from people has been really good. And I'm still finding my feet, like I said. I'm sure we'll have some hiccups along the way, but hopefully
don't we all, Indy?
Brilliant. So before
we have to work out some way of contributing. I mean, if you get lots of little clubs joining, if they could sort of all chip in with 10 quid or something like that, that would be the way to do it.
Yeah. So this was going to be on the last slide bit. I will be asking people for help because we've got the sort of next 2 or 3 months mapped out, which is great. And certainly from my perspective, I'm quite happy just to keep our meetings open to anybody to join in. I'm trying to encourage people who aren't even members to join up as well, because, everyone's stuck at home at the moment, aren't they? But it's that bit about how do we get other clubs to contribute in the future. I'm hoping that, if clubs are joining in, if each club pays for their own speaker, then we should have a good schedule for the rest of the year. If we've got enough clubs on board, which I think would work quite well, because personally, I don't want to be handling any money. I don't want that
No,
hassle. But yeah. So if so, has anybody got any other gardening questions before I close that part of it? Before I move on? Good. Okay, no worries. Well, if you have any other questions for the next meeting, then please let us know. Right. So next dates are the 14th of January and the 20th of January for our next speakers. So if you want to make a note of those.
May we ask who they are, Indy, please?
Yeah, they were on the email. So I think on the 14th, it's Darren Rudge, if I remember correctly. And that's a talk on...
Yeah, that's fine. That is correct, Indy.
Yeah, great. And then on the 20th of Jan, it's Simon Gulliver from the National Trust. Yeah. So just make sure we've got your email address, and then I'll add you onto the list. That's our email address there, the TSGCN, which obviously stands for Tender Shoots Garden Club Network. Keep a check on your spam folder because sometimes the emails go there. For the Barlison members, I have sent out the code for the Suttons, so get your orders in sooner rather than later. So yeah, that's where you get the 50% off the seeds and 15% off everything else. But that's only for paid up Garliston club members. Now for other clubs, this is just another advantage. I spoke to Suttons and I explained that we're working together with lots of other smaller clubs, because to participate in the Suttons scheme, you have to achieve a certain spend level each year. And if you don't achieve it, if you're a small club, then you can't benefit from it. But what they've agreed to do is they've agreed to give me a code for the tender shoots. So all the clubs that are working as part of that can also get the 50% discount.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
So all I need to know is which of your clubs want those and how many members you think will participate, and then I can send the code out to you guys, and then you can utilize it. So that gives you 50% off all the seeds and 15% off everything else. So again, apart from just these, Zoom meetings, there are plenty of other things that we can do, hopefully, working collectively, and that's just one of them. And I think if there's enough clubs, eventually I might try and ask Suttons for 60% discount or something. but I'll keep doing it. But I'm sure there's other things that we can benefit from, working together. Now, see, if you're part of the Alpine Garden Society, Hardy Plants, and all those, they're doing really well because they're big clubs. But for the small independents, it can be really tricky. So that option's there. I just want to say thank you as well, because it has been very tricky to get this set up, and a lot of the ideas that I do come up with are quite daft and crazy, and initially they always get rejected. I remember when I got involved with the committee in 2018, and other committees which Deborah will recognise as well. I seem to have to work a lot harder to prove my point, or I get kicked out.
I think the proof is in the pudding, Indy. You deliver.
Yeah.
So thanks Deborah. But yeah, and I've had lots of really positive feedback recently, lots of emails and messages, and saying thank you for getting this started. So it is fledgling. I'm still finding my feet with it, but yeah, those little emails that you send me actually do mean quite a lot, so thank you for those. In terms of the help, like I say, it's just me at the moment, but if there would be representatives from each of the clubs that would be willing to perhaps have a little, Zoom meeting, or committee meeting with me, just to sort of talk about any ideas and how we sort of map things out from sort of March onwards, that would be absolutely fantastic, because I'm still new to this, so getting your experience would be really good, and I'm happy to come up with all the crazy ideas, because I do think we need some interesting ideas to make sure clubs succeed for the future, because I've called a number of clubs recently, and some of them have told me that we no longer operate, we've closed, which is a real shame. So we want to try and prevent that if we can. So if I perhaps send out an email to people at some point, and ask you to join in, just a few representatives from any of the clubs, just for a casual chat, and then we can talk about how to do things going forward, that would be fantastic. Is there anything that anybody else wants to raise? Any other ideas, suggestions while we're here before I move on?
Indy, can I just say Suttons have got bare root geraniums at the moment for £3 each, if they want to look. Good deals.
Good, excellent.
Indy?
Somebody's asking me to confirm that the 14th is a Thursday. Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So what I've basically said to people, Stephen, is that what you were going to say?
Yeah.
Yeah, can I come in, Indy? The 14th was chosen because he was already booked for that date for Stone.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
And what I've also said to other clubs is if they are arranging their own speakers, then they can just do it on whatever day they want to. It's not a problem at all. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Wednesday just because the Barlaston meetings are on a Wednesday. Obviously when I send out the emails with the details on, it could be any day. So yeah, just watch out for that.
This is going to sound tremendously cheeky, bearing in mind I've got somebody here with me tonight. Rosalie's come along, but Darren Rudge, Helen, who you've got coming. Is tea bags, bras, and tights?
It is. It is.
Is it part one? Do you know?
I'm not sure, but I think part one. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a really, really good speaker, and he was due to give us part 3 in March, because we've had him several
times.
Yeah, so but he's an excellent speaker, and I know a lot of other clubs will have used him.
Yeah, Deborah, he was due to be what I would call a relaxing speaker after our AGM. So we are quite happy because at the moment we've got a club where we can afford a couple of speakers for you to actually support Indy as much as we possibly can.
That's very, very kind. Thank you. No, I just thought I'd clarify which tea bags, bras and tights.
Don't spoil the fun for everyone else.
Sorry.
Well, look, that'd be quite good, Deborah. If you do go ahead with him and he does it on Zoom, then obviously people can see one, and then they can see part 2.
Yeah, I mean, our program secretary had offered, because like you, Helen, like every club, I guess, we not only had speakers the whole of last year who had to be cancelled, we've also got speakers for the whole of this current year. And they don't always suit online. Some of them are very hands-on, aren't they, and practical. But yeah, I mean, there are some who will. So I would love to be able to work with Indy and share all of this. But there's I think Zoom, and however, that's a separate conversation. Sorry, Indy.
No problem.
We're working on it.
Right.
Indy, could I suggest that if some of those other clubs have got speakers they think are suitable, they send the suggestions, or we all meet to discuss them for the rest of the year.
Can I just ask on that question? Have the topic that the speakers have got to talk about, does it all have to be on a gardening subject?
I think yeah,
I mean, most of ours are for the last couple of years, but prior to that we had other topics, like being brought up in a corner shop or something like that. But, it was actually very interesting, but not particularly relevant to gardening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I've had, if I was to answer just from Barlaston's perspective, I think we'd probably, because we're a brand new club, we haven't, we've only had one talk so far. And I think people are probably expecting, when I've had this conversation with them, they're expecting garden talks. Whereas I guess lots of other clubs now, they've had the sort of speakers locally. So they've now branched out a little bit to make it a bit more enriched. Now I had an email from, I think it was Ted from, I can't remember which club it was. And he sent me a list of speakers, which was brilliant. And he said the best one he'd had was a lady who did a talk on Russia and the bureaucracy. Well, it's not bureaucracy, but the what's the word? Like the politics behind it. And he said it was the best speaker they've ever had. So that sounded really good. Now, what I'd say is if a club wants to book their own speaker, then book whichever one you want to. If we're all doing this together, if people don't like it, they don't have to attend that meeting. They can attend another one. At the moment we've got meetings fortnightly. If we have enough clubs on board, we could have a meeting almost every week, and then you can just...
Indy, what about the pennies and the pounds as well?
Yeah, so that's the so at the moment I'm just trying to focus on getting people engaged and getting involved. This is where I was asking for help from people just to discuss what to do going forward. So I think this is where from March forwards we'll need to probably agree something, because I'm sure, and I'm not ignoring the questions, but I know I will get questions from people saying, well, we've paid for 3 speakers, you know, and everybody else is benefiting, but certain clubs aren't, contributing or whatever. But then equally there'll be some clubs who've only got 2 or 3 members who will use Zoom, and then obviously it doesn't make sense for them to pay for something. So there are all those tricky questions which I'm aware of, but at the moment I'm just focusing on getting people, well, for starters, proving that this works. That's my first point. Does this work? Do people enjoy this? If they don't, then, well, I'll give up and move on to something else.
Don't give up before the end of February.
You're only at the first fence. Don't give up. Your enthusiasm will carry you forward.
Well, I mean, it is tricky. If I go back to when I got involved in the Open Gardens Committee, every suggestion I made was shot down. I was told to shut up and just do what I was told to do. And one of the ideas, and I appreciate some of the ideas are a bit crazy. So Barlaston's quite a spread out village, and we had an open garden event, and I was getting complaints from people who were on the outskirts saying that they didn't have as many visitors as the ones in the centre of the village, which I understand. So one of the ideas I came up with was a minibus service which goes round on a continuous loop. And everybody told me to just shut up and forget about it. And they said, that's a silly idea. So I went off on my own and tried to figure out how to do it. And yes, the quotes I was getting were quite expensive, £400 per bus. In the end, I managed to find people who did it for free. And they sponsored us. So we had these buses going round on a continuous loop. We actually had 3 buses. And I even had an app so people could download an app on their phones and sit in the back of a garden and see the buses going round on a loop. So they knew when to go out into the garden, into the front to catch the bus. So that was, objected. With the purple potatoes, there was a gentleman who turned up at my door and gave me a right good rollicking for considering even doing these purple potatoes. Yeah, it put me really off, but then 99% of the people have been really positive and said, and they actually wanted to do them again this year. And to be honest, he hadn't even tried the potatoes, but he kept telling me how tasteless and horrible they were and people weren't enjoying it. So I've had lots of, barriers put up in front of me, but I'm trying to persevere.
Good for you. We ought to give you a round of applause.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I was just going to tell you about one last thing. Somebody asked me to mention this to you all. The computer IT training, if I can get the slide up. The Barlaston Community Group have set up in conjunction with SCC Community Learning Services to offer complimentary computer training. And it's open to anybody, so you don't have to live in Barlaston to participate. So if you need any training on a computer or laptop or a device or Zoom training, then they're willing to do that for you. So you can get in touch with them. So if you want to take those details down, or press the print screen button on your computer.
Oh, yes. Cool.
If you know how to do that now, and then you can take those details down. Or if you don't get them down, then send me an email and I can let you know. Or just search for it online, the Barlaston Community Group. So is that okay? So have people enjoyed that? Was that all right?
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Yes.
Very good.
Very
good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks, Indy.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Indy.
Right.
Okay.
If
Thank
you
you,
want to
everybody.
disappear, you can disappear. Or if you want to jump into the breakout rooms,
you.
you're more than welcome to do that. Otherwise, I will see you all on the 14th.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye, folks. Bye.
Right.